afternoon, everyone. It is so nice to have you all join us this afternoon for this Lunch and Learn. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Kimberly Bolero, and I am the Interim Director of the Hero Center at Voices of Hope. Some of you may remember me from the very beginnings of the Hero Center, and I am so honored to be back with you for this very special Lunch and Learn event. It is my pleasure to introduce our guests today. Let me first introduce Mikolaj Grynberg, the author of I'd Like to Say Sorry, but There's No One to Say Sorry To, which is the focus of today's talk. Mikolaj is joining us from Warsaw, Poland, where he was born and raised. Mikolaj is a photographer, psychologist, writer and oral historian, I'm sure among many other things which we will talk about today. This newest publication is based on the oral histories he collected and published, and this is the first work which has been translated into English. Speaking of translations, we are also joined by Gasper, who produced the beautiful translation of Mikolaj's book. Sean has been translating Polish language texts for more than 10 years and has been shortlisted, longlisted for many literary awards and recognitions over the years, including the EBRD Literary Award and the National Translation Award. Thank you both for joining us today. I believe I can say dziękuję. Is that correct? I know two Polish phrases and it stops there. But we can use those throughout the day. So there will be time for audience questions towards the end of the program. So please send them directly to me, to Kimberly, using the chat function. So if you will, please join me in welcoming Mikolaj Grynberg and Gasper.
Hi, hello, thank you, and Shana Tova for everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all so much for the invitation. It's really wonderful to be here.
We're so excited to have you here. And I guess the first couple of things we wanted to cover today. Mikolaj, let's maybe start with you. You were born and raised in Warsaw. Maybe can you talk a little bit about witnessing how the country has changed over the years and what that has meant for this publication? Do some of these stories resonate with you and your experience? Maybe you can, that's a lot of questions already to begin with, but maybe you can talk a little bit about this experience of being a Polish citizen and kind of witnessing this change and how it affects your work.
Okay, thank you for the question. Let me answer in Polish because my English is far from being perfect. So thanks to Sean, I'll be able to communicate with you. So if you allow me, I'll continue in Polish. Are you ready, Sean?
Tak, proszę bardzo.
Ja się urodziłem w 1966 roku w komunistycznym kraju.
I was born in 1968 in a communist country. 1966 in a communist country.
Urodziłem się 2 lata przed olbrzymią falą antysemicką, która spowodowała wyjazd prawie połowy populacji Żydów w Polsce.
I was born 2 years before a massive anti-Semitic wave that forced out nearly half of the Jewish population of Poland.
My też mieliśmy wyjechać, ale moi rodzice w ostatniej chwili uznali, że głównie mój ojciec, że udało mu się przeżyć wspólnie z rodzicami getto i to nie jest moment, żeby się rozstawać.
We were going to leave as well, but we decided at the last minute, namely my father decided at the last minute that they had survived the ghetto together and that this was not a moment to separate.
moje żydowskie doświadczenie było zupełnie inne niż moich rówieśników na całym świecie.
My Jewish experience was very different from that of people of my same age around the world.
No, w szkole ja byłem jedynym żydowskim chłopcem.
I was the only Jewish boy in school.
Byłem jedynym dzieckiem, które nie poszło do pierwszej komunii.
I was the only child who didn't go to get First Communion.
I byłem tym jedynym dzieckiem, które dostawało za to lanie.
And I was the only kid who got beaten up because of it.
Więc po 2 latach mojej szkoły podstawowej rodzice zdecydowali, że przeprowadzamy się ja zmieniam szkołę i przeprowadzamy się do innej dzielnicy.
So after 2 years of school, my parents decided that they would move me to a different school and that we would move to a different neighborhood.
I rzeczywiście wylądowaliśmy w takiej bardziej inteligenckiej dzielnicy, gdzie już mnie nikt nie bił, tylko po prostu cały czas się bałem, że to się stanie.
And so sure enough, we moved to a more white-collar neighborhood where I didn't get beaten up anymore, but was still always afraid that it was going to happen again.
No to jest, ja wiem, że może być inaczej, bo mam rodzinę na całym świecie, mam przyjaciół żydowskich na całym świecie, ale moje doświadczenie jest takie i myślę, że ono mnie ukonstytuowało i paradoksalnie chyba bym go nie chciał zamieniać na nic innego.
So I know that a childhood doesn't have to be that way because I have Jewish friends and Jewish family all over the world, but that has been my experience and it has shaped me, and maybe paradoxically, I'm not sure that I would wish for it to be any different.
Na pewno dało mi jakiś rodzaj wrażliwości na inność i myślę, że zaważyło na całym moim życiu dalej.
I think it's given me a kind of sensitivity to difference, and that has had an influence on the rest of my life afterward.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. And I love that the two of you are so in sync that you're able to so immediately communicate with one another like that. It's wonderful. Mikolaj, can you talk about the origin of the idea of conducting these oral histories with the generation born after the Holocaust?
Ale pytasz o to, dlaczego powstały te pierwsze dokumentalne książki, czy rozmawiamy już o tej amerykańskiej książce?
Are you wondering about my earlier work writing documentary nonfiction books, or about this first book that's been translated into English?
I think the first book that is translated. Yes. I suppose. What was the motivation of recording and sharing oral histories that you have done? Yeah.
To jest ten najtrudniejszy moment w rozmowie o tej książce, bo to nie jest książka dokumentalna.
Yes, this is the hardest moment in talking about this book, because this isn't a non-fiction book, it's not a documentary book.
Mimo że to jest nie do obronienia ta teza.
Nie do obronienia? Czyli...
Nie, znaczy, że i tak nikogo nie przekonam, że to nie jest dokument. Tak?
Even though it's not possible, I can never manage to convince anyone that it isn't non-fiction.
Więc ta książka się wzięła z potrzeby pisania po swojemu.
The book arose from my need to write in my own way.
Wtedy, kiedy się pisze dokumentalne historie, ma się pewne zobowiązania w stosunku do bohaterów i nie można zmieniać ich słów.
When I was writing nonfiction books, I had a certain responsibility towards my subjects, and for instance, I couldn't change their words.
A w tej książce nie miałem zobowiązań, ani nie musiałem być lojalny w stosunku do nikogo. Mogłem pisać, co chciałem i jak chciałem.
And for this book, I didn't have any more obligations towards anybody. I could write what I wanted and how I wanted.
W związku z czym mogłem napisać, wyciągnąć z tego taki ekstrakt rzeczy, które mnie poruszyły i pominąć wszystkie zbędne wątki.
That meant that I could pull out a distillation of what it was that moved me and leave out all of the extraneous threads in the story.
I ta książka jest takim zbiorem lęków, moich lęków. Jest jeszcze trochę takich, których tam nie ma, ale to już by było nieetyczne mieszać w to osoby trzecie. No więc jest tylko tyle.
And this book is sort of a collection of anxieties, my anxieties, but also, myślę, że dobrze zrozumiałem, also some anxieties that I don't have, but that it would be unethical to leave out.
Nie, jeszcze są takie, które mam, ale już nie wypada ich pisać.
Some that, sorry, I misunderstood. Rather, some that I have, but that it's not proper to write about.
Że już to co tam jest, przynosi wystarczająco przeżyć i łez, już więcej nie trzeba.
What's already there sort of causes enough stress and tears that there's no need to push it any further.
Mhm.
Absolutely. The stories for our audience who may have not picked up the book yet, this is an incredible collection of 31 stories. Yes, Sean is holding up the book for us. It is truly a unique collection of perspectives. And as you were both speaking, I was kind of imagining the words from many of these different stories, and they cause a small bit of anxiety. They are extremely bold stories, and you can very well imagine the narrator speaking and expressing very sad truths, and also you can see them almost holding up a mirror to themselves, which I think is a really interesting point of this book. So to imagine that these may or may not, these have originated from years of speaking with people and learning about people and human behavior, it's really a very, like I said, a very unique collection. And I highly recommend these stories for a really deep connection in reading. So we'll move on from there.
Can I hop in real quick? Actually,
of course.
I sort of,
please.
I think I've thought a lot about kind of what makes this book feel so immediate and so emotional. And you know, each of the stories is basically a monologue by a different character, and they're addressed at a collocutor, right? At like somebody else kind of across the table, and who may be Mikolaj, who may not be Mikolaj, you know. And I think that brings it so much immediacy, is because so many of these stories are actually sort of spoken in the second person. You know, there's a you, and you as the reader become that you. There's a person directly in front of you speaking directly to you. I've read this book over and over many times, and I feel like that is part of the quality that makes it feel so immediate, and that kind of roots it kind of inside you as you're reading.
Absolutely. You just like you said, Sean, you do feel like you are that other person across the table, and that this person is speaking to you, and you do have to internalize the stories
And often in confidence, right? Often sharing secrets, often sharing, intimate family stories, sharing trauma, So you become implicated, you become kind of a co-conspirator sometimes in sharing these secrets.
Yes, it is. It does become deeply personal in a way, and I think also the fact that they are short stories, they are incredibly short. They are glimpses into part of a conversation, and I think it leaves the reader thinking, okay, what was it that brought these two people at the table together? And then when it ends, you're thinking, after this person has this experience of relating a story, or even holding up that mirror to themselves, you kind of want to know what happens to this person after. So you really have to sit with one story before you can move on to the next. And I've also found that to be a very exciting and unique experience in reading it. Yes, absolutely. And so maybe, Sean, we can, I want to stick to you for just a moment. You've translated so many works in your career so far. How was this particular collection of stories unique for you?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the thing that was most interesting to me as a translator is because each story is, as I was saying, is a monologue, is spoken by a different character. It was very important for me for them to sound different from one another, and so that you could really just sort of concretize that these were different people. And some of the stories are sad, and some of them are funny, and many of them are both. But there's a lot of they're very different stories from one another in a lot of respects. And I spent a lot of time thinking about what would these people sound like if they were Americans, if they were telling these stories in English. And one of the things I turned to is the Yiddish Book Center in Northampton, Massachusetts has an online collection of oral histories of American Jews from all different generations. And so I looked for oral histories of this generation of American Jews, and I listened to them telling their stories and tried to hold those voices in my head as I was translating. I wanted it to sound really real. I wanted it to sound grounded. I wanted it to kind of help that immediacy. I also translate a lot of nonfiction, and like Mikolaj was saying, fiction definitely gives you a lot more freedom to play around. So that was also something that kind of set us apart from maybe my usual work. But I guess, and Mikolaj himself, I should say, was very helpful. I had all kinds of questions that he was able to clue me in on, and I had the pleasure of getting to know Mikolaj as well before I started working on this, and so I could hold his voice and his sense of humor and his wisdom in my head as I was working on this. I really think of Mikolaj as a truth teller. I think he's somebody who is capable of extracting that distillation of something. I often find that Mikolaj has chosen just the right words to say just what he needs to say in just the right small phrase. And I am not as laconic as that, and so I often had to challenge myself. How can I shrink this down? How can I get this into an even more kind of powerful little statement that still has all of that meaning in it, that still has the layers of meaning, that often still has the humor, but that packs a punch because it's so concentrated.
Okay, and so could you tell us a little more about the experience of translating someone's work and that experience of staying true to their words and their meaning. But maybe also as a translator, do you leave your own creativity in the words that you choose for someone's work? It must be a very fine line between representing someone's artistic work and being an artist in your own right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, inevitably the book reflects my style and my artistic choices. I try not to be intrusive, but it's also just not possible for me to erase myself in that respect. I think, there's a lot of metaphors for translation, but one that I write about in the translator's note to this book is the idea of translation as photography. I think my father's a photographer, and so I spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I think that what you get in a translation is, is sort of like a photograph of an original image. You're getting something that hopefully captures the full essence of something that still has power, something that can still make a very strong impression on you. But that is, of course, shaped by the photographer's vision and by the photographer's techniques and the photographer's choices. And two different photographers taking a picture of the same object are not going to do it in the same way. And but that to me is not a question of loss. There's this sort of cliche about things getting lost in translation. To me, it's just another type of artistic experience, right? For a reader, it's giving you first and foremost, it's giving you the opportunity to see something, to read something that you would not have been able to before, right? And so that is an enormous gain. But it's also a unique and valuable artistic experience in its own right,
Okay. Yeah.
So that's kind of the way that I think about it. But it's, I like the ventriloquism aspect. I like the playing with different voices. I like trying to write in a way that I don't usually write. I like the play that comes along with it. I like all of the linguistic puzzles. Polish grammar is very complicated. And I spend a lot of time sort of going, okay, so this lines up with this and this lines up with, okay, so and then figuring out, okay, how can I do that same effect in English, using different grammatical devices, different vocabulary. What can Polish do that English can't? What can English do that Polish can't? How can I make the most of both of these languages, So it sometimes feels like a Rubik's Cube or something, but I like that.
I can completely understand what you mean by that. There are some things that you just can't find. Things that you find in one language, you can't always find in another. And it's both wonderful and frustrating all at the same time, because then you have this beauty and realness of language. Let's go back to, you mentioned photography. Mikolaj, you are also a photographer, a trained psychologist. We spoke a little earlier about your many professional, well, I guess not titles. We said not titles, but the various professions that you have. How did you approach this particular work? Did you feel that you approached it with all of these professions and their aspects coming together, or do you think you approached this as a storyteller, as a historian, as a Polish man, as a Jewish man? Where did these come from?
To śmieszne, bo normalnie jak się mówi, jak ktoś pokazuje takie CV, to się mówi, że to jest ktoś bardzo niestabilny.
No, normally when you show somebody a resume like mine, they think, oh, this is somebody who's very unstable.
Więc w pewnym wieku, jak ja mam 56 lat i właśnie to jest mój trzeci zawód, no to raczej nikt poważnie na mnie nie patrzy, więc miło mi bardzo, że to doceniacie.
At a certain age, I'm 56 and this is my third career. And at a certain point, people don't don't look at you seriously anymore. So I'm glad that you appreciate it.
Ale rzeczywiście było tak, że każdy z tych etapów do czegoś mi się przydał.
But in fact, each of those stages has actually proven useful to me to a certain degree.
To podejście terapeutyczne, bo taki był plan, miałem być terapeutą. I studia, i wszystkie staże, które w tej sprawie zrobiły, dały mi narzędzia do rozmowy.
The therapeutic aspect, and that was my plan, that was what I had studied, that was what I was meant to be doing, gave me the tools to talk to other people.
Do tego, żeby nie mówić za dużo, nie bać się łez, nie bać się ciszy.
How not to speak too much, how not to be afraid of tears, how not to be afraid of silence.
A na tym polu, którym ja się zajmuję, jest dużo ciszy, jest dużo łez i jest wielka potrzeba bycia wysłuchanym.
In the area where I work, the area that I work in, there are a lot of tears, there is a lot of silence, and there is a lot of need to be listened to.
Więc ja przechodziłem w miarę płynnie z jednego w drugie, ale tylko dlatego, że kraj, w którym mieszkam, był w momencie, kiedy ja wchodziłem w dorosłe życie, też sam ten kraj był w momencie transformacji.
So I've moved sort of fluidly from one thing to another, but it's also because the country that I have lived in has been in a situation of transformation.
Więc dla mojego pokolenia to oczywiście wiele osób z mojego pokolenia rozpoczęło duże kariery i je kontynuuje, a ja wybrałem taką drogę, żeby zdążyć zrobić kilka rzeczy.
So for many people of my generation, they have managed to start one career and continue with it, but I've preferred to do multiple different things.
Ale oczywiście, znaczy to przejście pierwsze między bycie terapeutą a bycie fotografem, no to jest historia bardzo, bardzo młodego chłopaka, który się zakochał w robieniu zdjęć.
Of course, taking that first step from being a therapist to a photographer is the story of a very, very young man who fell in love with taking pictures.
Natomiast to drugie przejście jest bardzo świadomym przejściem od fotografii do pisania i to jest przejście, które wymusiło, fotografia po prostu okazała się być niewystarczająca narracyjnie do tego, żeby móc opowiadać historię.
But that second step from being a photographer to being a writer was more conscious. In the end, it turned out that photography wasn't enough to tell stories of the people whose stories I wanted to tell.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Maybe, and speaking of your photography, everyone, we will get a chance to see some of Mikolaj's photography in just a little while. Before we do that, maybe a question for you both. What kinds of challenges are there when you are creating a work like this together, to ensure that Mikolaj's work is reflected in this English language world? What is this process of working together on that like?
You have to choose one of us to start.
Mikolaj, why don't you start?
Okay. Ta współpraca z Seanem była wyjątkowa dla mnie. Znaczy, po pierwsze się poznaliśmy, po drugie się polubiliśmy.
The work with Sean was exceptional. First we met, and then we got to like one another.
I też ta współpraca bardzo się różniła od wszystkich innych tłumaczeń tej książki, a jest ich już całkiem sporo.
And our collaboration was very different from work on all of the other translations into other languages, and now there's quite a few of those.
Ta nasza współpraca zabezpieczała moją potrzebę kontroli nad wszystkim.
Our collaboration satisfied my need for control over everything.
Dużo rozmawialiśmy o tym i ja byłem pewien, że jak ty będziesz czegoś potrzebował, to się odezwiesz.
We talked an awful lot about it, and I felt sure that if you needed something, speaking of me, that if you needed something, that you would get in touch, that you'd speak up.
Na przykład hebrajskie tłumaczenie tej książki. Dowiedziałem się, kto to robi. Napisałem do tego tłumacza, że bardzo się cieszę i że jestem do dyspozycji. I już nigdy więcej i on powiedział, że okej. I to była cała nasza wymiana.
With the Hebrew translation of the book, I found out who was doing it. I wrote to them and said that I was available if they had any questions, and they said okay, and that was the last I heard of them.
I potem odezwał się do mnie wydawca, powiedział: wymyśl tytuł.
And then the publisher wrote to me and said, think up a title.
Ja powiedziałem: ja nie mogę wymyślić tytułu, bo ja znam kilkadziesiąt słów po hebrajsku, część jest niedrukowalna i no, to się nie uda.
And I was in no position to think up a Hebrew title because I know maybe a couple dozen words in Hebrew, many of which are unprintable, and it just wasn't an option.
Ale oni bardzo naciskali i ja
pushed me really hard.
znalazłem słowo, które podobnie brzmi po polsku i po hebrajsku. I taki tytuł ma hebrajskie wydanie.
Bałagan, prawda?
Balagan po hebrajsku.
But I managed to think of a word that is the same in Hebrew and Polish, and that ended up being the title in Hebrew. And the word is balagan in Hebrew, bałagan in Polish, which means a mess, a great big mess. I should say that. Proszę?
I oni powiedzieli: widzisz, jak chcesz, to potrafisz.
And they said, see, if you want to do it, you can. Where there's a will, there's a way. I should say the Polish title of this book was very challenging to translate. It's Rewach, which is a Polish Yiddishism that means sort of cacophony, or like, yeah, sort of it's the sound of human voices overlapping.
In Polish.
In Polish.
Because
yeah.
In Yiddish, that has a completely different meaning.
Yeah. And so I spent a long time trying to think of something suitable in English. I grilled all of my Yiddish translator friends, of whom I have a number, to try and come up with something, and we didn't manage to. And so for the first publication of a selection of these short stories, we used the original Polish title, and I think we included a little note kind of explaining what it was and why we had left it. But this title, the title of the English edition, our publisher came up with. And it's a line from it's the last line, I think, of one of the stories.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that was great how, Sean, you told us about how Mikolaj feels about you.
I'm glad he feels good about our working together. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, obviously it requires a fair amount of chemistry and agreement to move forward with a publication like this. And so, as you said about using text from the book, we're right on schedule. I'm so excited about this. I would like to move on to the photography reading section of the event if we could. So Sean, you can share your screen, yes? And so Just for our audience members, Mikolaj is going to give us a short taste of the text in Polish, and then Sean will continue for us in English. We get to see a number of Mikolaj's photographs, and if you have questions for our guests, please send them to me, and after that we will get started with the audience Q&A.
Okej. Krzesło. Żydzi chcieli nam ostatnio zabrać krzesło. Krzesło jak krzesło, nawet za wygodne nie było, ale go nie oddamy. Sean? Teraz ty.
Myślałem, że czytamy Niemca, ale krzesło
Nie.
może być. The chair. Some Jews recently wanted to take our chair away. A chair's just a chair. It wasn't even that comfortable, but we won't hand it over. Years ago, my grandpa showed me the bottom of the seat had a smudged stamp that said Germany. As he put the chair back on its feet, he muttered to me. He didn't say anything, but a thread of understanding had been tied. I thought it was clearly a looted chair. My grandpa is built like a tank, so who knows, maybe he just stole the chair from the Germans. And maybe that's the reason nobody sat in it. It stood in the kitchen between the tall cabinet and the window, the protruding windowsill slightly blocking it off. It acted as a place to put freshly bought groceries. It was black and ugly. It didn't match the other furniture. As far as I can remember, it was never given the honor of being brought to the dining room table. It would have stood there peacefully if not for the letter Grandpa got one day from Haifa. Grandma took it from the mailman and placed it on the cabinet by the front door. Grandpa came home, inspected the envelope front and back, and set it down again. For the first week, Grandma teased him that some pretty little Jewish girl must have fallen in love with him. Grandpa was stubborn. He didn't comment. He didn't open the letter. The letter lay there in plain sight for more than a month. Mom pressured Grandpa to open it, but he didn't reply. He'd just give me a wink. I'd wink too, though I had no idea what he meant. In the end, Mom couldn't resist and opened the letter from Israel herself. To our amazement, it was written in Polish. Greetings. We are the grandchildren of Menachem of blessed memory, who found shelter in your home along with his two sisters from 1942 to 1945. His sisters were killed 2 days after leaving your house, which you probably do not know. Our grandfather told us a great deal about you. After leaving Poland in early 1946, he never returned there. We understand that his experiences from the time of the Shoah kept him from going back, but we would like very much to meet you. If not for you, there would be no us. Let's meet. If you would like to come visit us, we will cover all the expenses. Please just write saying how many tickets to buy, for when, and what names. We await your reply, dear Polish friends. Menachem's family. Grandpa listened to her read the whole thing, gave a dismissive wave of his hand, and went out into the yard. To every question he answered, ancient history. Neither he nor anyone from our family went to Israel. The Israelis came to us. One day we saw them by our fence. You could tell from a mile away that they weren't from around here. Menachem's son was standing with his wife and adult son and daughter in front of our house. Grandma greeted them with tea and cake. We had a hard time communicating because only the father spoke a little Polish. He said he knew exactly where his father and aunts were hidden, but he had to go outside the house to find the place. His father had told him many times how he walked there in the dark. We went outside the cottage, and the counting began. 7 steps from the threshold, and then left to the door to the kitchen. Then 4 steps, turn right, and another 4. Bend over and lift the trapdoor to the cellar. It worked like a charm. The trapdoor was in the right place. The Israeli father looked questioningly at my grandfather, and Grandpa nodded. Their whole family went into the cellar and closed the trapdoor. Silence fell. After a moment, Grandpa bent over and forcefully pulled up on the handle in the floor. They emerged in silence, terrified. The Israeli father looked around the kitchen and his gaze fell on the German chair. Is that the chair my father sat in every night, looking out to see if any strangers were coming? To which my grandfather replied, that's the chair I put over the trapdoor whenever the neighbors came over. I'd sit in it until they'd closed the gate behind them. I'd sit there and pray for them to get out of here already. The Israelis wanted to take their grandfather's chair as a memento, but we couldn't give it to them because it belonged to our grandfather. They suggested paying us for it, but Grandpa wouldn't hear of it. Once they'd gone, he took the chair to the woodshed, chopped it into pieces, and said, I'm sick of staring at it, and they'll find life easier without it, too.
That was really beautiful. Thank you so much. And I'm actually very happy that you decided to go with that story. That's something that I have chills just thinking about it. That is some stories like this are the same stories that resonate with a lot of our community, and I think maybe also a lot of our audience members. Engaging in these stories of being helped or not, I think it's an extremely, I think it has an extremely profound point, especially for our particular audience. So thank you very much for that. We do have a couple of questions from the audience. Oh, here it is. So Mikolaj, do you have siblings? That's the first one. And if yes, older, younger, and what is their experience?
I have a younger brother. Mam młodszego brata.
I have a younger brother. 4.5 years. Tak?
Tak.
4.5 years.
Okay.
No i on poszedł do szkoły po mnie.
He went to school after me.
I to znam, ja tego nie pamiętam, ale znam to z opowieści rodzinnej. Sean? To zaraz będę kontynuował. Jak on poszedł do swojej pierwszej klasy, to po kilku dniach ja wróciłem do domu i powiedziałem, że sprawdziłem wszystkie dzieci w jego klasie i nie musimy się bać, bo poza nim jeszcze 2 dzieci nie idzie do komunii.
I don't remember this, but I heard it from family stories that once he started going to school, after a few days I came home and said that I had checked and we didn't have to worry because there were 2 other kids in his class who were also not getting their first communion.
Ale no, żyjemy w takim kraju, w jakim żyjemy, więc on też miał takie swoje doświadczenia.
But we live in the country that we do, and so he, of course, also has those sorts of experiences.
On długo mieszkał w Kalifornii, w San Diego, ale po paru latach wrócił tutaj.
He lived for a long time in San Diego, California, but after a few years, he came back here.
Okay, thank you. Another question we have is that you referenced 1968. Can you speak a bit more about what happened at this time and what is its continued impact?
No powinniśmy mieć dużo więcej czasu, żeby móc się w ten cały kontekst zagłębić.
We should really take a much longer time to get into the full context of it.
Ale w dużym skrócie powiem, że na skutek walk wewnątrz komunistycznej partii polskiej powstał taki olbrzymi antysemicki ruch.
But the very short version is that because of power struggles within the Polish Communist Party, there arose a large anti-Semitic movement.
Który, jak to zawsze w Polsce, padł na dobry grunt.
Which, as always in Poland, fell on fertile ground.
I ta fala w bardzo krótkim czasie wzrosła do takich niewyobrażalnych rozmiarów, że ludzi wyrzucano z pracy, wyrzucano z mieszkań. Oni po prostu nie mogli tutaj zostać, bo nie mieli gdzie zostać.
And that wave in a very short time reached such unbelievable dimensions that people were thrown out of their jobs, they were thrown out of their homes, and simply could not stay in Poland because they had nowhere to stay.
I oczywiście spora część tych ludzi wyjechała do Izraela.
And of course, a large share of those people left for Israel.
Wyjechali poza tym do Stanów, do Danii i do Szwecji. To są główne kierunki wtedy.
They also went to the United States, to Denmark, and to Sweden. Those were the main destinations at the time.
Jedynym sposobem, bo te kraje ich przyjmowały. To nie jest jakaś ciekawostka, dlaczego akurat pojechali tam. Oni pojechali tam, gdzie ich przyjęto.
Because those were the countries that would let them in. There was no great mystery about it. They simply went where they could go.
Natomiast sama procedura wyjazdu była okrutna. Oni musieli pójść na posterunek policji i zrzec się polskiego obywatelstwa i powiedzieć, że nie chcą być już Polakami i chcą mieszkać w swojej ojczyźnie Izraelu.
But the actual process of emigration was very cruel. They had to go to a police station and renounce their Polish citizenship and declare that they wanted to return to their homeland, which was the state of Israel.
A dla wielu z nich bycie Żydem nie było jakimś podstawowym doświadczeniem ich. Oni byli Polakami, mieli korzenie żydowskie, ale oni nie mieli nic wspólnego ani z kulturą żydowską, ani z religią żydowską, ani tym bardziej z Izraelem.
But for many of them, Jewishness was not a core part of their identity. They were Poles who might have some Jewish background, but who had little to do with Jewish religion, with Jewish culture, much less with the state of Israel.
68 zrobił z nich Żydów.
In 1968 turned them into Jews.
I większość z nich do dzisiaj mówi, że są o sobie Polakami, ale jedyny kraj, który im zabrania tego, to jest Polska. Wszystkie inne kraje to akceptują.
The majority of them today say that they are Poles, and the only country that forbids them that is Poland. It's the only country that doesn't accept them as Poles.
No to tak historia 68 w dużym skrócie.
So that's the story of 1968 in a very short version. I should say one of Mikolaj's nonfiction books, one of his collections of interviews is with Polish Jews who left in 1968. It's called the Book of Exodus.
I z tymi, którzy nie wyjechali.
And those who did not leave.
Mhm.
I haven't translated that one yet, but someday, hopefully.
Thank you. And I guess then moving into today, we had a question about what is it like being a Jewish person in Poland today?
No to jest jeszcze większy temat niż ten 68.
That's an even bigger subject than 68.
We'll take the short version.
Domyślam się, że przyjmiecie tę krótką wersję.
I could guess that you would take the shorter version.
Dzisiaj w Polsce jest kilkanaście tysięcy Żydów.
Today in Poland there are around
słowo kilkanaście.
But there are over 10,000 Polish Jews, between 10 and 20,000 Polish Jews.
Myślę, że najbliżej 12.
Closest to 12,000.
Jest dużo organizacji żydowskich. Jest kilka czy kilkanaście działających synagog.
There are numerous Jewish organizations. There are maybe a dozen or so active synagogues.
Różnych synagog, reformowanych, konserwatywnych, progresywnych, różnych.
Various types of synagogues, Reform, conservative, progressive, Orthodox, various.
No i tak jak to w tej części Europy, jak jest dobrze, to jest dobrze, a jak jest za dobrze, to już dobrze nie jest.
As it often goes in this part of Europe, when things are good, they're good, and when they're very good, they don't stay that way for long.
Bo karta żydowska zawsze jest przydatna, jak zbliżają się wybory.
Because when elections are coming, the Jewish card is always helpful.
I to, co się dzieje wtedy, nie powoduje, że mnie ktoś wyrzuca z domu, czy że ja tracę pracę. Tym się po prostu wygrywa wybory.
And what happens then is not that I get thrown out of my house or that I lose my job. What happens is that they win the election.
Bo polski antysemityzm dzisiaj już nie potrzebuje Żydów. To już działa samo.
Because Polish anti-Semitism today doesn't need Jews anymore. It just runs on its own.
They are self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient.
Thank you very much. And of course, when one follows what is happening generally in Europe with elections, it's generally more worrisome every year, and so in Poland is no exception. But it is incredible that that you are with us, even, well, for our audience so far away, but can still bring these stories to us, whether they are through your fiction or nonfiction or photography. It's really a gift that you are able to give us. So I have one closing question for you, Mikolaj. What do you want your audience to come away with from this publication?
To ja bym chciał z każdą książką, nie tylko tą, ale tak staram się konstruować te opowiadania, żeby po skończeniu każdego opowiadania ta historia nie mogła się zamknąć w głowie.
Well, I would like it for all of my books, not just for this one. But I've tried to construct these short stories so that after finishing the story, a given story, it doesn't close in your mind.
Uważam, że mój sukces jest wtedy, kiedy wy zamykacie książkę, bo skończyliście, ale dalej jesteście z tymi historiami, bo to znaczy, że między wami i mną dalej coś się dzieje, mimo że książka jest zamknięta.
I think success for me is when you close the book because you've read all the way to the end, but the stories keep running in your mind, because what that means is that there is still a link between the two of us that continues even though the book is closed.
talking about chills, I got them again because it is exactly how I feel. I finished the book, I think, a week ago, but I'm still thinking of these small human moments from the book itself. And so you have at least one successful case right here, Mikolaj and Sean. So we're just at the end of our program, and so I wanted to thank Mikolaj and Sean for such a remarkable talk this afternoon. Mikolaj and I this evening. Thank you for joining us all the way from Warsaw and for giving us this gift of this book. And Sean, your translation brings this work to life for English audiences, and it really is exquisite. We really cannot say enough about it. So thank you, Dziękuję, for joining us today. Thank you to our audience, and of course our co-sponsor, the Jewish Book Council, who brought this book to us in the first place. We are so grateful for that. If you'd like to purchase a copy of I'd Like to Say Sorry, but there's no one to say sorry to, my colleague has put a link in the chat. You can learn more about Mikolaj and Sean there as well. And if you like today's program, you can visit our website for the rest of our events calendar. You can consider making a donation at our website, text to give number. You can find us on Venmo. There are millions of ways to support your local nonprofits in this day and age. And so every ounce of support is always so appreciated. All of those ways are in the chat box. Our next event is our annual Youth Corps Memorial Service, which will take place on Sunday, October 2nd at the Mandel JCC. That will be at 11 a.m. If you'd like to RSVP, I believe that's also in the chat. Thank you so much again for joining us, and congratulations on such a beautiful publication to you both, really.
Thank you very much for all of you for the invitation. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. And just to add, there were two success stories, because I also had the same reaction and can't stop thinking about them. So I would also encourage everybody to read the book. It is time very well spent.
Thank you very much, Robin. Thank you. Take care and have a good year. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone. Shabbat Shalom, and we'll see you at the next event.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you very much, Sean.